My name is Gerard Daché. I'm the Executive Director of the Government Blockchain Association. Today in our healthcare roundtable, we've got two GBA members who's going to be sharing a little bit about application of pharma standards in the emerging global CBD market. Deepak, Deepak, how do you pronounce your last name?
Utkede.
Perfect. And Sean Carl. Ross is the one that really kind of introduced them to us. So Ross, you want to tell us a little bit about these two distinguished guests, and then we'll let them share their thoughts.
Okay, so I'm off mute. Yes, so we were scrolling through the working groups one day and could not help but see that the cannabis working group popped out. And I took a look at it and I could see it was sort of sitting there just doing nothing. And it occurred, well, what if we put the word hemp in front of cannabis? So we threw it out there for consideration on rebranding the working group to the hemp and cannabis working group. As soon as we did that, the interest in that space just exploded. And we were able to connect with Sean Carl, with the distro, and through him able to connect with Deepak and what they were doing at Vantagehem. And we just saw the value of the GBA coming together in support of what they're attempting to do within the space. It hits all the hot buttons for us: standards, regulations, supply chain, pharmaceutical. It was just a great place. But with that being said, I'm going to turn it over to Sean, and you can tee up Deepak for us.
Great. Thanks a lot, Ross. Thanks for the intro. Yeah, been a pleasure getting to know you guys over the last couple months here, and really happy to be participating in the hemp and cannabis working group. Little bit of background on me. I won't go too deep, but I've been a cannabis guy all my life. I've been an activist. If you go to my LinkedIn, you will see the 2002 Canadian Senate report on legalization, which was called the Nolan Commission. I am referenced in that report. I addressed the committee, the Senate committee, in 2001 in defense of cannabis entrepreneurship. Now, having said that, I've always had a day job. I've always been a good boy. And so my day job has always been in this ERP, business intelligence, and enterprise application space. So I've worked for Oracle, I've worked for SAP, I've worked for Sage on ERP, sales services, and delivery. And so that was a very strong foundation for the emerging seed to sale compliance, regimes of the cannabis trade. Very, very complex trade that involves, highly regulated goods with a lot of different constituent attributes that need to be managed in order to complete a transaction. And so my group has been working in this space in one capacity or another over the last, where are we now? 7 years, I guess. And in that time, we've worked for a couple of LPs, licensed producers up in Canada, most relevant being Ascent Industries, which was on both sides of the border. So we had operations across Canada, but also in Oregon State, and in Nevada as well. And so really experienced on both sides of the border in terms of the jurisdictional issues for hemp and cannabis. And then inside of that, while working for those LPs, we went out and actually acquired a custom ERP stack. We actually brought in a whole company, a dev team. I'm not sure if Joel's on the call right now, but Joel is one of our partners very involved in this project. And he, through over the last 10 years, had developed a very high-end ERP, very specific to medical manufacturing. So had a lot of the same, already the same workflows and applications and logic built in for regulated trade. And so now we've ingested that IP into the distro. That's the good thing about this industry. You get a lot of companies that raise a lot of money and then spend it all, and then they wind up flaming out, and then we pick apart the wreckage and we get to keep the pieces. So over the last 5 years or so, we've built up quite a great stack of IP. We have a very, very strong team in terms of the types of work we can do from both the ERP seed to sale application stack, but also from a middleware tier that we have as well as a part of our partnership. And so we're putting those pieces together right now to well, I won't go too deep into it because I'm going to show you some slideware on that, but maybe I'll stop there for now. And then I'll just talk a little bit about Vantage and give Deepank a chance to talk. So we started building all these great tools about 2 years ago, but as I said, there's a lot of companies blew a lot of money and they were having a tough time raising more. And so what we found was that rather than investing in the technology at this time, they just need help moving products. And so we.
Oh, wow.
We lost him.
All right, Deepak, this is your turn now.
All right, well, wait for him to come back. All right, I'm not sure where he was going with his introduction, so I'll just kind of jump into it. My background is pharmaceutical, mainly on pharmaceutical development, from the aspects of formulation, process development, process validation, toxicology, clinical studies, everything up to the handoff for commercialization. That's when it kind of gets boring. You're just making the stuff over and over again. So I spent a good 22, 23 years in that field. And with that, gained a lot of background on GMPs, the application of GMPs, and the requirements for to enter the medical market. When we got this opportunity for Vantagehem, when we were designing the buildings and the space and the process, I really went through and applied all of those principles, because what we saw at the time, so this project was started back in 2019, and it was very unclear at the time how different jurisdictions were going to treat CBD. But from the anecdotal evidence that was out there, it was very clear that CBD, it behaved like a drug. It has receptors. There's a dose response curve. There's toxicity associated with it. And also, the FDA had approved CBD as a drug through Pharma for that orphan indication of infantile seizures. So, when we looked at setting up this facility, we looked at, how would CBD be regulated? And we also looked at other companies within the space that had, and just in the general cannabis space, and saw that everyone who tried to do seed to sale had difficulties that were not successful. The jack of all, master of none. So when we set up Vantage, we looked at the entire process and picked extraction and purification to focus our efforts, because really that was the unique piece. It was different. The formulation side, that's pretty straightforward. That's something that pharma industry has been doing forever. It's everything that cosmetics or even consumer packaged goods companies have been doing forever. That's pretty straightforward. The extraction side was a little bit unique, because for the most part it was in garages and in the black space. And so there wasn't a lot of technology that was there. So we saw this as our opportunity to grab a hold of this, develop it, and become experts in it. And then from there, we would expand our capabilities depending on what customers demanded of us. So Vantage was set up as initially as exclusively taking raw hemp biomass and extracting the cannabinoids and other components, and then purifying it through various stages of purification to CBD isolate. What we saw as we were perfecting that, customers were coming to us and saying, "That's great, you're using GMPs to produce that material," but they were like, "Well, we want to go to the next step, because there's very few pharmaceutical manufacturers that were willing to handle a cannabis product, even though it was federally legal. They just saw it as too much of a risk." So we expanded our capabilities to finished goods, which allowed us to expand our customer base. We really focused on the design and construction of the facilities around two primary concepts. One is safety, the other is GMP, and not just North American GMPs, but global GMPs, so that we're compliant regardless of the jurisdiction worldwide.
And Deepak, for those that don't know, can you just mention quickly what GMPs are and what the relationship is to manufacturing and pharmaceuticals?
Right. So GMP stands for good manufacturing practices. And you'll often hear GMP or CGMP. And the C stands for current good manufacturing practices. Basically, it's a set of, the best way to describe it, the GMPs are a set of minimum manufacturing guidelines that pharmaceutical manufacturers have to use in the manufacture of medicinal products. Primarily, it's for anything that goes through a regulatory body. So any sort of drug, whether it be aspirin or whether it be something as complex as the vaccine. It's a set of guidelines that every manufacturer has to comply with, and it covers. And the presentation that we have, it kind of goes into a bit more detail, covers things like training programs, quality assurance, talks about how you set up your quality management system, how you set up your company, what are the requirements for cleaning, what are the requirements for process control and process development. So it's all encompassing, with the ultimate goal of ensuring that any product you do produce is safe for human consumption. The analogy I use is basically, if you produce something, would you give it to your mom? Would you give it to your daughter? Would you give it to your family? Do you feel safe doing that? That's kind of the tenet. Does that answer?
Yeah, I'm back.
That answer your question? Sorry, we went ahead without you.
Yeah, no, awesome. Yeah, no, for sure. Thanks, man. Yeah, I've got some slideware where I can kind of contextualize this in the that supply chain piece and the standards overlay in the context of this. So I'll make a point of throwing that up in a sec here.
Okay. And just for everybody's so everybody's on the same page. So this is really about blockchain and healthcare, but we're really kind of focusing in on the healthcare, the pharmaceutical, the CBD thing, and then we'll bring it back into why is blockchain important. So for those of you that are interested in blockchain and token and cryptocurrency, we're just to let you know, we're really going to kind of focus on the healthcare CBD, but we are going to come back and say exactly why is blockchain and tokenization important. So just want to get everybody on the same page. All right, Sean, it's back to you.
Okay, great. Awesome. Well, thanks, Deepak, for bailing me out there. Yeah, I'll do a quick screen share here, guys, and I'll just take you through our distro blockchain framework, if you will. So as I mentioned, we have our ERP seed to sale. We have our middleware stack. We have a model, if you will, our white paper, so to speak, and we have a roadmap. And we'll take you through all of that. And then that'll probably set a nice scene for Deepak's presentation so you can start to see how these two things intersect. So I'm just going to share my screen right now. Here we go. Where's my controls? There we go. And let's do the whole screen. And then maybe we'll start with just a bit of a recap of the working group. So the Hemp and Cannabis working group, so we came together really to address some of the major issues in this industry, which are plant provenance, so what we call seed to sale, super critical, because you've got stuff coming out of the ground going into a plant that you are then extracting and putting into medicine. Well, whatever's in that ground is going to be in that medicine, and so that becomes a very critical aspect of this trade that is not necessarily the same for all products as you move through the supply chain. So that's one major issue. Another major issue in this industry is there's a lot of bad people doing bad things in this industry. And so governments and good people don't really want to be crossing streams with the bad people doing bad things. So keeping your supply chain integrity from seed to sale includes also eliminating opportunities for diversion or infiltration, incursion, if you will, of your supply chain with unregulated or as Deepak referenced earlier, black goods. And so that's another major issue. And then of course, the other major issue would be that funds, tracking cash, managing cash. There's a lot of, again, when you got bad people, bad things happen with the cash too. And so governments are very concerned about maintaining control over the cash and getting their piece of the action. And so those are the three sort of main overarching premises that drive the supply chain technology here. And then, so I'll just get into quickly, sort of some of the big issues at hand. So, the industry needs trust across the supply chain, product standardization and quality control. Deepak talked about the warehouses and the basement bucket shops. They're everywhere in CBD. Secure transactions. I said product provenance already, compliance and standards that are consistent so that we can trade internationally. And we've got some examples of that. Access to capital, right? Because now we've got this huge issue where there's no banking. The Safe Banking Act is spinning and looping around and around and around and around, and nobody knows, what they can do with their money in this industry right now. So that's a huge challenge and opportunity. The clinical research. So historically, CBD has been treated the same as THC, and so it's been hard as Schedule I drug to do any research on that. And so access to that, and then being able to make health claims around your research. So for the clinical folks in here, that's where the rubber really hits the road. Until you have indications that you can solve for, you don't have a medicine. And if you can't study it to get those indications, then you don't have a medicine. So those are some of the major issues that we're facing right now. And so we see, building trust in a regulatory standards framework that governments can get behind will then unblock some of those other channels as well. So I'm just going to stop with the working group charter, and I'll cut over to the distrio for a sec. So our group, as I mentioned, we came together looking to deploy some really cool technology to help people trust their supply. And we have a very specific approach. So what are we? We are a global partner network. We are experienced in this industry, more so than pretty much anyone. Our team, there's 7 of us. We have been transacting cannabinoids around the world for as long as it's been legal to do so. And so we've set up some partners both here. Of course, we very strongly partnered with Vantage. On the Canadian side of the border, we have a similar partner in Endless Sky, which does smaller scale, not to the standard of Vantage yet, but that's just, big American cousin versus little Canadian cousin. And then in the EU, we have a partner in Ireland. In Australia, we have a partner down there. And so what that means is we have global access to move both flowers and oils anywhere around the world, or finished goods if we happen to have them anywhere around the world. So that's what we've set up to do over the last couple of years. As we wait for the market to mature and the transaction volumes to reach a point where automation makes sense for a lot of these companies, we're ready. And so between our network, between the fact that Vantage is the only company, there's only one other company in the world who can operate to pharma standards in the CBD space, and certainly the only one based in North America who can do so. So that's a very strong partnership as well. And so, as I mentioned, I won't go into that. So just to give you a bit of an overview of the provenance and how blockchain comes into it. I know we're not going to go deep on this right now, and that's fine. Frankly, my blockchain guy isn't here right now, so you guys are going to have questions I can't answer. And just so you understand, I'm a product guy. I am a business apps guy. I am a commercial operations guy. I'm a technology operations guy. What I am not is a developer. And so we're not going to get into the intricacies of smart contracting in the blockchain space with me. But what we can do is get into the use case, the business value, the issues at hand. And of course, Deepak will take that to another level. And so when we talk about the supply chain in cannabis, we go from the field, from the seed and all the things that happen to govern your production there, all the way through to extraction and manufacturing. And of course, there's many, many regulated processes in there. And then all the way through to transport, because it's a highly regulated, secured good. And then, of course, you've got the wholesale retail distribution, and finally your customer. And in this space, customers want to know, what plant did my oil come from? And you have to be able to provide that. So here's a good example that I like this slide a lot. So this really talks about the phasing of products from plant matter through to oil, through to isolate, which is your molecule, through to where you put that into finished goods, how those are governed by different standards, and then ultimately the distribution control. And so at each stage of this, you've got things like cultivars need to be registered, like right down to the genetics of your seed need to be registered. And so your genetic seeds is where it all starts. And then you go through that. Of course, once you crop out, you've got to sample that crop and send it to the lab to test if it's got any pesticides, heavy metals, biotoxins, all that. And then you get what's called a certificate of analysis. And that certificate of analysis has to follow the product all the way through. So a farmer ships it off to an extractor like Vantagehem, they're going to get a COA or a certificate of analysis with that has all the readouts. Now, they have to, then their quality assurance team has to go over that certificate of analysis and decide, are the levels of metals and pesticides and all that at an acceptable standard to GMP, right? Or higher. And so as you can see, the standards here, so we've got good agricultural collection practices, we've got GMP or EU GMP on the other side of the pond. And then we get up in here where we talk about isolation and molecules. Now you're getting into this refinement process, and there's even another standard there, which is the ICH and the Q7A. And again, Deepak can talk about all this high-end pharmaceutical manufacturing governance. But again, you're tracking different things at each stage to comply with those standards. And then finally into finished goods, which require labeling now and packaging and all those other pieces that need barcodes, right? But barcodes are registered in a central database all over the world, the GS1 database. So having an interface between GS1 and your product allows your product to move around the world more fluidly. And so I'm going to just keep skipping ahead. I got a lot, there's a lot of ground to cover here, and I want to give Deepak time to talk. I'm just going to stop here on the last piece. So our approach is a product-centric approach. I mentioned that we have an ERP stack. We have a middleware stack, but we've done ERP. We've been on the ERP thing. Joel's been at it for 20 years. I've been at it for 20 years. We've done multiple implementations and deliveries. We don't want to do ERP anymore. ERP sucks. Let other people do ERP. Deepak will tell you they've been implementing ERP for a long time, and I'm sure it's going great, but it takes a long time. It's super complicated. You wind up spending a lot of money for oftentimes questionable return until you have a mature platform driving your business. And so we said, okay, let's screw out the whole seed to sale implementation and the complexity of that. Let's look at the object that's being traded or transacted and how we can facilitate that. And so what we're building is a consolidated data object for the product. And that is going to contain information such as the certificate of analysis that we just talked about, such as your SOP that have to comply with those GMP standards. And then the final piece of the puzzle is all of that transaction is accounted for in the context of an ERP. So you have things like a bill of materials and a cost of goods associated with that product. If you have a seed to sale tracking ERP, then you'll have a batch to lot provenance in your ERP. But you can't just sell that until you actually take that batch or lot, run it through a lab and find out what's in it. And so those two things have to be combined in order to be actually conducting a trade. And so that's our approach. And then the blockchain aspect of this in the early days will be the trust object. And so by bringing these through the QA process, validated data points into a consolidated data object that is immutable, that will be our first step in the roadmap, is simply being able to take this consolidated object, put it up on the blockchain, and then reference that against what are likely going to be internal contract and resource workflows that exist in the ERP context. So what we're toying with right now is how smart a smart contract needs to be. Because today, a lot of the logic of the trade is contained in these ERP systems, these seed to sell ERP systems. So, we're playing with that architecture to decide what's the best place to validate those transactions up against that ledger object, which is this product object, so that QA teams can say, yes, approve, yes, approve. I mean, that's basically it, right? You bring the material in, you process it, you put it in a finished good, you slap a COA on it, says this is what's in it, you send it out the door, the QA team on the other side gets it, they look at it, they check it to make sure what you say is in it, and when they're happy, they say yes, and now you can complete a trade, and only then. So that's the process that we are automating. We're building a trust object around so that those trades can happen like that. And ultimately under a smart contracting process over time, so that even the fulfillment and the automated fulfillment and the re-fulfillment of those contracts goes against that. So I'm going to stop there. Maybe I'll just give everybody a couple seconds. I know we don't have a ton of time and Deepank's got a hard stop. So I want to give time for Deepank, but if there's any quick questions on that, I'll keep my answers short. Okay, that's the scene set. I'll hand over to Deepank and then we can leave time at the end for questions.
Yeah, and if anybody has any questions, feel free to write them down in the chat, and then we'll certainly address them as we go. Awesome, Sean. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Okay, great, thanks. So as Sean was going more on the blockchain side, I'm going to be more on the application, like the real world applications of the GMPs and how we had to basically look at how we would apply those to what we're doing here at Vantage. So let me share my screen. Can everyone see the first screen there?
Yep.
Okay, great. All right, so so just to give you a bit of a timeline as to what we were doing. So March in 2019 is when we started this project. We began the design and construction of 2 facilities here in Greeley, Colorado, approximately an hour north of Denver. Total square footage is about 60,000 square feet. And as I mentioned before, we really focused on extraction and purification. We tried to get in growing in the first year. We quickly realized that's not for us, and we moved away from that. And then finished goods, we left up to our customers up until this year, where we took that on in-house. So what we have set up here across these 2 buildings is extraction using supercritical CO2 or liquid propane to get our crude extract from our biomass. Then we do go through a winterization, distillation, and then a crystallization process. So effectively 4 steps. By October of 2020, we had completed construction and commissioning of the facilities. And really that came down to sign off from not only the city, but also the local fire marshal. All of our processes, liquid propane, and we deal with each one of our rooms. We have 2 of them, 600 pounds of liquid propane present in each one. So high risk processes. And for that, we needed to ensure that the city, the fire marshal signed off. So that commissioning included sign off on all of our safety systems and fire prevention systems that we had installed. It was at that point that we were able to run and develop all of our processes and establish all of our documentation. We moved very quickly, and by December of 2020, we had started our Gmp certification process with SGS, and by March of 2021, we had completed that certification process. And what that gave, what they inspected us to or certified us to being compliant with is EU GMPs, ICH Q7, which is the International Committee on Harmonization guidelines on GMP manufacture of active pharmaceutical ingredients. So we don't consider what we're making a botanical extract. We consider what we're making an API, an active pharmaceutical ingredient. That's CBD based, and at the different stages at various levels of purity. When we look at how these 2 buildings were designed, as I mentioned earlier, they're based on safety and quality. The quality aspect is ensuring that we comply with global GMP regulations. In terms of safety, what we're looking there is ensuring that not only our operators work in a safe environment, but also in case of an emergency, that we protect our first responders that will be coming to deal with the situation. And when we look at why we went high at the extreme in terms of at the extreme of the regulations and applying to GMP, not look at just complying with food regulations or dietary supplement regulations, but really looking at complying with pharmaceutical GMP regulations. And really that came down to, what the FDA was doing. So just recently FDA, and so when we started this, we figured let's go to the highest level. It's easier to go to the highest level and kind of dumb down the systems if it turns out that all you need is food regs. It's a lot more difficult to start at food and try to achieve pharmaceutical GMPs. And it looks like that's probably a wise decision that we employed in the beginning. The FDA recently rejected Charlotte's Web's new dietary ingredient application for CBD. And really what it came down to is an FDA internal regulation that basically says if a molecule is approved as a drug, it cannot be approved as a dietary supplement or a dietary ingredient. If it's approved as a dietary ingredient, then approved as a drug, then that's allowed to stand because it's grandfathered in. So basically what's ended up happening is because no one had applied for CBD to be a dietary ingredient, Epidiolex through GW Pharma approval set the path. So it's a drug. The FDA considers it a drug, and they will continue to consider it a drug until the regulation is changed. But what's interesting with the FDA is that they expect that the CBD will be manufactured, and the CBD products will be manufactured compliant with CGMPs. But what they've done, and they've kind of straddled the line, they basically allowed other manufacturers to make CBD products, put them on market as long as they do not have claims on them. So they don't claim to treat pain and inflammation or sleep or anxiety. As long as all you say is it's CBD and the concentration, they won't come after you. The instant you put a claim on it, they will they'll come after you hard and they'll shut you down. So as long as there's no claims to treat, prevent, diagnose, treat, or treat or cure serious diseases, you're free to enter the market. So they've kind of taken this kind of hands-off approach. But if you do apply for it, they expect you to go through the drug approval process, not the dietary ingredient. So if you look at, what steps should be considered GMP, there's a nice flow chart in the Q7 guidelines. So basically, collection of the plant material, cutting, and the initial extraction. So everything up into and including the CO2 extraction and liquid propane extraction are considered non-GMP. All of our purification processes after that point are considered GMP. So the introduction of that crude into our winterization process, that's considered GMP. Distillation and isolation to produce our crystallized CBD, and then any physical processing. So anything that goes to its final product is considered GMP. So for us, it starts at the crude material is our starting raw material for our GMP process. However, that does change slightly if you have a customer or someone who wants to use that crude material as their basically raw material for their finished goods. So then that would be considered GMP. So although we could have started at crude and gone to the end and call that GMP, we've actually taken it right from the intake of biomass to the isolate, the entire process GMP, and have controlled it that way. If you look at GMPs and what they require, one critical area is quality procedures. So you have document control, central repository of approved documents, and the control of that is utmost important. It's not just that documents are there; that only the current and valid documents are there. So anyone who's going there for training, for example, they're pulling up the SOP and they can only have access to the most current version of the SOP. So they're not training on the wrong version. Change control, that's basically any approved document, you can't just change it. You have to go through a process where you describe what you're changing, why you're changing it, and most importantly, the impact it has on product quality, product GMPs on the entire process. You have to have a very comprehensive investigation and deviation program. So basically, and all of these are SOP driven. So the investigation deviations really covers you're doing your manufacturing and something doesn't go according to the process, you need to not just say that it's okay. You need to go through a comprehensive investigation to say, what happened, why did it happen, try to identify the root cause, and if there's any follow-on, like if this is a recurring problem, do you have to change your procedure? Do you have to change your process? Do you have to do more training? Your training is not adequate, so you have to look at what are the causes that cause this deviation to occur. And then you have what's known as Kappa, corrective actions and preventative actions. And really what this focuses on is ensuring that, okay, you had an investigation, how do you prevent it from happening again? Or how do you correct the current problem? That's a critical part of any investigation that any auditor from a regulatory body is going to be looking at. They just don't want to see that you say that something went wrong, and then you say, yeah, no impact, and then there's no follow-up for it. So they're really going to be focusing on being able to have a path for making sure that this doesn't happen again. And so those are our critical procedures. Now we look at facility design, and for us, it was a very careful dance between building code and GMP requirements. So we built this facility to be completely compliant with ICE International Building Code and International Fire Code, and they're both kind of interlinked together. And so what that meant is that we'd have to ensure that those two codes go to safety, and then we'd have to adapt our building design so that the safety requirements are met, but also the GMP requirements are met. An example of that is our winterization room. Our winterization room is classified to hold up to 2,000 or up to 2 to 10,000 gallons of methanol, which is, as you know, highly flammable. Building code requires that 25% of the perimeter wall area, a surface length, is on an outside wall. So it needs to be so that there's, in case something goes wrong, there is a quick and direct path to the outside for any operators that may be in the room. But you can't have that wall, you can't have that because there's going to be penetrations in it with emergency exit doors or roll-up doors. You can't have that directly butting up to your manufacturing space because it's a contamination risk. So we had to put in an airlock. We need a break between that outside area and our manufacturing area, and this is a 10-foot wide by 20 to 25-foot long corridor. That's dead space. We can't use it for anything because it's considered non-classified space, so we can't use it for manufacturing or storage of equipment. But it's also, you can't have anything in there that would impede people from exiting the building. Other aspects of facility design, you have to ensure adequate space for the processes. You need to ensure that operators aren't tripping over equipment, aren't tripping over each other, because that'll lead to mistakes and issues in that regard. Things like all of our equipment, all of our processes need temperature control. So we have temperature control units that are located outside the room, but you need to pipe in all that temperature control fluid. So you need to ensure that all the insulation or any coverings on it are rigid and cleanable, so that during your regular cleaning process you can clean those covers and it's not a contamination risk. There you will have hoses that connect equipment to other processes. You have to ensure that those hoses are not lying on the floor. So what we've employed here is these yellow risers that basically clamp around the hose and keep the hose from touching the floor. Other aspects of facility design, where we can, we've kept kind of, I'll call it dirty equipment. So temperature control units, steam generators, circulators outside of our manufacturing space, because those units not only generate a lot of heat and noise, but they do also generate potentially generate particulates that could contaminate products. So keeping those in a separate area allows for a cleaner work environment and a more comfortable work environment for your operators. Another aspect is water quality. So any time you use water within your processes or within your cleaning procedures, you need to ensure that that water quality is consistent. So what we've done here is we've put in a Pharma grade water purification system that does deionization and deionization and reverse osmosis to purify water to USP purified water grade. And that circulates throughout the system, throughout the facility. It has a series of zero dead leg valves that that are points of use for operators. The system is monitored and maintained on a regular schedule. And this water is used for us. The water is only used for facility cleaning and for equipment cleaning, so that we have consistent water quality during those processes. So we get consistent cleaning results. In terms of facility cleaning, I mean, the general procedure is, to remove soil and control bioburden. We've employed 2-in-1 cleaners that, work to do both of those in the same step. You have to ensure that you establish a regular cleaning program. So daily cleaning, cleaning of the floors, cleaning the walls, and you can't forget to clean the ceiling. The expectation is that, on a regular basis, you have a procedure to clean your ceilings to ensure that that doesn't build up with bioburden. And you need to demonstrate effectiveness. So environmental monitoring for microbial contamination, using settle plates or contact plates or both, to ensure that you are controlling bioburden within your facility and within the regulation limits. And then ensure that you have a regular testing schedule to confirm the effectiveness. Another critical part of the GMPs is training. You have SOPs defining your training program. It tells you who needs to be trained, what they need to be trained on, how do you document that training, types of training, whether it's just read and understand for simple procedures, or read and understand, demonstrate, and then read and understand, demonstrate, and then watch them do it on their own to ensure that they've been listening and have been trained adequately. You need to establish a good training matrix for your personnel based on their job description. And then ensure that you have different training levels, as I mentioned, like you read and understand, demonstrated, and you also have to have a way to assess that the training has been completed adequately. And usually that's through tests, independent operation of equipment, observations, things like that. And then you have regular retraining. So whenever SOPs are updated, you have to ensure that people are made aware of that, and then that they update their training to ensure that they've trained on the new SOP. And then you have just annual training, just GMP refresher courses for all your operators after they've been with you for a while. The other key component of GMPs is you building quality into the process, not test your product into compliance. We've separated our process here into significant but logical steps. So we got biomass preparation, the extraction to produce the crude, winterization, distillation, and crystallization. And we have a comprehensive set of documentation and training for each part of this process. So that covers things like equipment SOPs, master batch records for each step that clearly defines the manufacturing steps, specifications, and then certificate of conformance, basically saying that everything has been done properly, it's ready for the next step in processing, or it's ready for sale. You have to do process development. So before you get to those equipment SOPs or master batch records, you have to understand what the process is and what are the important parts of that process. So that's where process development comes in. You document your studies showing the effect of changing various parameters and see whether it's a benefit or a detriment to the process. used to, and we use this to establish, the process parameters and justification. So if something goes out of spec or out of a range, we can go back and look at this data and say, okay, it's still good, or it's, when it goes outside this range, the product is no longer usable. It must be rejected. You also have to go through equipment qualification. So basically installation qualification that proves that the equipment's been installed properly, and operational qualification that makes that, confirms that as equipment is installed, it's documented everything operates according to the equipment manufacturer and also according to the user's specification. And then we also have process validation, which documents that the process as defined in the batch record is robust and reproducible. It produces the same product and with the same quality attributes time and time again. And then as part of your, and this is a critical part of GMP compliance, is internal audits. Basically, this is where you do a self-assessment of how you're complying with the GMPs. And the reason why this is important is the regulatory bodies are, inspection by regulatory bodies are generally few and far between. They usually come in when there's a problem or when you're trying to get approval for something, but then they try to do it on a regular basis every 2 to 3 years, but they can miss it because of restrictions due to resources. So it's really, if you look at pharmaceuticals, it's really a self-regulated industry with oversight by the FDA. But this, when you do have an inspection, when they come in and look at what you've done, they want to see that you've done these internal audits and that there were results from those internal audits that basically resulted in, okay, you have to change your procedure. They want you to be very self-critical because it tells them that you are actually looking deep enough. It's not just a cursory overview of your process and say everything's good and then you move on. They want to see that there were some issues identified, that they were corrected. You must have an SOP governing the process and the schedule that it needs to be done on. Covers the frequency, areas to be covered, and the forms to guide the inspection. So basically, you fill out forms. These internal audit reports are not inspectable by regulatory agencies because they want you to be critical. They want you to point out where your shortcomings are and then correct them because they want you to find them before they find them. So it's, because it is always better that you find these issues before someone else does. And that's the presentation. Just a quick overview of how we've applied the GMPs here at Vantage. Any questions?
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you very much. So I'd like to, I got a question, and feel free to either raise your hand or just take yourself on mute, off mute and ask your question. But if I could ask Sean to kind of go back through that process, Sean, can you just kind of go back and identify where, and I know without getting counted in the code levels, can you go back to how the blockchain sort of, is there a place for a blockchain component in the life cycle phases that the Deepak went through? Because I know you did talk about some of the money transactions and provenance. Are there any intersections in the GMP portions of it? Yeah,
I've got one slide deep. So if you want to maybe stop your screen share, I'll share mine and I'll just show you that little one here. I've got an extraction specific slide. So it gets really cool. Just a sec here.
And unfortunately, I'm going to have to leave. But if there's any follow-up questions, please don't hesitate to reach out and I'll be more than happy to answer them.
Yeah, can you drop your contact information in the chat so people can reach out?
Absolutely. Yep.
And
thank you very much, everyone.
Thank you, Bebop.
All right, have a great day. Thank you.
I'll take you guys through sort of one of the major use cases here. Just let me pull up. Let's pull up a COA of any sort. Yeah, this is a good one. Okay, so this is a certificate of analysis. And so this, anytime you take a plant off the field, or you take oil out of a plant, or you put oil into a product, you have to do a lab pull. And so actually one of the things we should offer for this group here is, so the Vantage team Deepank offers virtual tours of the Vantagehem facility. So Vantage has 2 buildings totaling 60,000 square feet. And they also have their own lab. So this lab, I'm just giving you a COA example that I had handy, but they have their own lab in-house. So they can do a lot of this analysis in-house. And then what I just want to kind of point out here is, the lab tracks the lot sample, that the laboratory itself has to be certified for its own activities, and the tests they do have to be to a standard. And so things like the limits of detection and the limits of quantification, those things meet standards that are GMP standards, or in the case of Canada, the Cannabis Act standards, which were designed to map to GMP so they'd be interchangeable globally. And so in this certificate of analysis here, you've got a list of all the cannabinoids, because there's not just THC and CBD, you've got things like CBC, Delta-9, CBG, and every one of these plant constituents has medicinal value. Unfortunately, because research has been so limited, a lot of it is anecdotal, a lot of it is just, it's hippie logic. I don't know what else to say. And then a lot of people started to study just into the power of these compounds. So, when you are transacting a crop out of a field, how much percentage CBD is in there matters, because if I've got 1,000 pounds, or call it 1,000,000 pounds of hemp biomass, well, if it's 3% CBD, then I've got what, 30,000 pounds? Am I doing it right? Yeah, 30,000 pounds of CBD. But if it's 11%, I got 110,000 pounds of CBD. Well, that's a 4-fold or nearly 4-fold increase in the value of that crop. And so imagine if a farm takes down 1,000 acres and delivers 1,000,000 pounds to Deepank's back door and says this is 11%, and therefore it's got whatever, 110,000 pounds of CBD in it. Well, then that's going to cost X. But if it's 3%, then it's only got 30,000 pounds of CBD, and it's going to cost Y. So you can't complete that transaction until that product has been run through the lab at Vantagehem, and they say, okay, we agree. Or if we don't agree, because maybe Deepank's lab comes back and says, no, this is 9%. Well, 20,000 pounds variance there is a lot of money. 20,000 pounds of CBD isolate is a lot of money. It's 10,000 kilos right now. You're looking at probably 3,000 a kilo. That's $3 million. So you kind of want to be accurate in this piece. And so what we actually have to do is not only compare the readouts, but how they got there. And so that's where we come in. That's where the distrio comes in, being able to automate the comparison of these laboratory analysis at each end of the transaction. We have terpenes in here. Look at all these terpenes. So these are all medicinal constituents of the plant, and these are almost microscopic weights. This is actually a really high terpene score for this particular readout. Anything that moves into over into whole numbers for terpenes. I mean, we're more used to seeing this. We're used to, if the top 3 terpenes add up to 1 point anything, 1 point teen, then we're happy. So this is really terpene rich product here. And then just quickly, there's all the rest of the terpenes. There's lots of terpenes. And that's what gives it the flavor and the aroma. And again, it has the medicinal values. Toxins, microbes, heavy metals, and then we get into pesticides. So these are the solvents, and then we get into pesticides, and we'll have like 5 pages of pesticides. And then check this out. So every one of these, take cyfluthrin, for example. Well, it's called cyfluthrin in Canada, but in Australia might be called Zagozag. And now you've got a QA team in Australia that gets this COA, and they're looking all over the COA for Zagozag, and they can't find it anywhere. And they're like, well, you didn't test for Zagozag. And we're like, we don't know what Zagozag is. And so actually being able to cross-reference. So if I go, I'll just show you guys now because we're all here hanging. I mean, if anybody wants to drop off, I guess they can. But I just want to show you something on PubChem that's kind of cool. So if I go to PubChem,
Sean, I want to let you know, we had the thing reserved for 2 hours, so we don't have to use the whole 2 hours, but you don't have to rush through it. We got time. You don't have
okay.
to.
Okay, cool. Well, yeah, I mean, sorry, I could go forever on this guy. So, so let's take cyfluthrin and let's throw it into PubChem for a second. Okay.
And when you're done with this, Raj Sharma had a question and Christian, so I want to give them a chance to add, and also Priyank. So after you go through this exercise, I want to give them a chance to ask their question.
Okay, great. So I won't go too long on this, but I just wanted to make a point here is when I look up cyfluthrin, what we will find is that it actually has tons and tons and tons of names. And so here we go. Of course, I'm doing this on the fly and now I can't find the spot. Okay, I'm not going to go heavy into this. I don't want to waste everyone's time, but this will have like 100 different names. And because of that, it becomes impossible for a QA person to visually analyze 2 different COAs and match them. So having the logic, the AI logic between PubChem to be able to pull out like for like across 2 COAs and cross-reference them, so that they're like for like is a huge accelerator for quality assurance teams. And so I'll just go back into this, which talks about the extraction process. So I mentioned we've got our plant mass, and it's an important point here. There's only one plant. It's called Cannabis sativa. Hemp and cannabis are actually just legal constructs. Hemp is a Cannabis sativa plant that has less than 0.3% THC in it. Cannabis is a Cannabis sativa plant that has more than 0.3% THC in it. So going back to Vantagehem and 1 million pounds of product showing up on the doorstep, yes, is it 11% CBD or 3% CBD? That matters, but what matters just as much is this 0.3% THC or less? Because guess what? If some hemp farmer shows up at Deephank's back door with 1 million pounds of product that's 11% CBD, but 0.5% THC, well, that guy just showed up with 1 million pounds of illegal weed. So you can see how quickly that becomes relevant. And now as we get into the extraction process, as you start to pull product out of here, you may be condensing and concentrating some of those constituent materials. So you really need to have that. And then when you get your oils and you move into the various different phases of oil where you're taking out the fats and waxes, you're taking out maybe the minor cannabinoids and some of the terpenes and left with a pure oil, or finally a pure isolate compound, at each step of the way, you have to do a COA. So maybe I'll just stop there. I'll check the chat here. And here we go. Okay, Priyank's got to go. Okay, great. Okay, so I'll just pause there on. So as you can see, the phase changes through here, each one of those requiring COAs and that laboratory step. And so maybe I'll just stop there and give a chance for some questions.
Yeah, I always just see, when I see the word documents, I see blockchain. It just always fits in my mind too.
Yeah.
Any part that documentation is in the equation.
Yeah, and so that's what this is, right? So the Distrio master product object will be the trust object. And so we're going to pull those laboratory COAs into the batch and lot to match them. And then where there are SOPs for like the sampling, the limits of quantification, the limits of detection. So for example, we go back to that guy and we say, well, you only sampled the tops of the plant. You didn't sample the whole plant. We can see from your SOPs. So then we just like, you have to go take a whole plant sample. Oh yeah, it really is 3%, right? So that's the kind of thing that we would automate from a documentation standpoint, bringing the COA, the SOP, and the batch and lot data into a single place, ensuring that it's like for like so that the people can validate against it. And then it should just be a tick approve, tick approve.
Awesome. Christian, do you have any questions? Did that address your question or concern?
So I think Christian would be here from Vantagehem. And so I think he was trying to help answer there was a question from Raj. And so I think Christian was trying to help answer that.
Yeah, I was just helping out Raj on that one. So just a little clarification on the FDA.
Gotcha. Well, and if there are no other questions, Sean, if you were advising a healthcare startup that it has to deal with GMPs or other sort of certifications, right? Through the process that you went through, what advice would you give them in terms of how to deal with regulators and have they been, when you've talked about using blockchain, have they been receptive? What kind of conversations have you had from the government perspective with regard to blockchain?
Good question. So far, they've kind of run from it. It's still very much, Canada is a more conservative country than the United States. So we tend, which is funny because we have federal legalization and the US doesn't, but I think just, historically Canada's been much more conservative. So what we've seen, and we're very fortunate in that one of our partners was Director General of Health Canada. And so, they run, he's given us the how to handle the government piece, and they're still running from blockchain. They're not taking it seriously. They think it's a shyster cryptocurrency. That's what they hear. They're not serious about this yet, or if they are, they're not telling us. And in Health Canada context. So, what is the opportunity? The opportunity in Canada is still to educate. The intersection, my advice to people that are looking to solve for this space is don't try and do everything at once. Like I've been through two full seed to sale implementations for two LPs, including one with operations on either side of the border. So I'm very clear, and for the benefit of the techies on this call. So as I said off the top, I'm not a developer, I'm a product guy. What I do have is I have a user story library for seed to sale ERP and integrations and all of the attendant applications. I have over 1,000 user stories that map to the ERP seed to sale compliance workflow. And so where things break is when we try to align our financial systems with our compliance reporting systems. And that's a big mistake I'm seeing so far, where things just fall apart, is the things that you do to manage your finances, your inventory valuations, your cost of good models, those types of things, government doesn't care about. What they care about is how much product is on that shelf, to the microgram or micro pound, what ounce. Sorry, that's what they care about. And so where a lot of these things fail is everybody's trying to provide an integrated solution that says, okay, government, I have 1.3 million pounds of biomass on my shelf, and it's worth this much. Government doesn't care how much it's worth. And so now you go to the market and you're like, okay, I got 1.3 million pounds of biomass on my shelf and it's worth this much. Well, the market doesn't care how much biomass you have on your shelf. They care how much it's worth. And so, because if you say it's worth $10 million, the market's going to ask you, why do you think it's worth $10 million? And you're going to say, well, our cost of production, our margin, blah, 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 blah. Government doesn't care about that. Government wants to know that if you say you got 1.3 million pounds on the shelf, you got 1.3 million pounds on the shelf. And so what happens a lot of times in these situations, you start running back and forth between inventory and finance, trying to figure out how much is on the shelf. Because if I go back a slide or two here, it's not just what's on the shelf, but it's what phase it's in. Like imagine for Vantage, they've got inventory that's plant matter. They got inventory that's in the middle of decarboxylation. They've got stuff that's being extracted. They've got different kinds of oils, and each of those has different cost models applied to it and valuations applied to it, all the way down to finished goods. So trying to actually manage that flow and make it align with how you report your processing and your weights and your states, it's an absolute nightmare. So keep church and state separate in that context is one of the biggest things. That's why we don't want to touch ERP. We're focused specifically on that trust object. And again, I'll stop there. I can talk forever. So
yeah, Pravash has got a question.
Okay. What do we see here? No, not any SDK, not any clones. But oh wait, so I'll go up here. Sorry.
No, it's this is I sent it for it's they will some ask a question about this NFT platform. We have to do is some already we will build some NFT platform for also healthcare has insight for DNA and for it's many kind of things. But I will explain. I have some important question for healthcare side. Something like 2 years ago, I will propose some presentation in the Switzerland about this healthcare for FDA and direct supply chain secretary program, you know. And the direct supply chain secretary program has many things of also for blockchain and for government side, or also a connection with SPA and SAP and also hyperledger side, you know. Now is I see your system is working for like it's FDA program is the same similar. This supply chain service and also its certification service also it's something like it's SGS or any kind of other certification system. For example, if you are doing this platform and if you connection with this system, why you don't build something like module of the SAP and FDA or it's a hyperledger?
Yeah, and that might be, like I said, we want to download a lot of the logic to the ERP, right? So you know, we intend to provide the trust object that's validated against that transactional logic in the ERP, right? So we have a unique thing, and we don't, you know, I haven't seen SAP tools at that level. I don't know what they look like and what they do, so I won't say that I do. But I would expect that the logic exists in the SAP. But at the end of the day, the object that's being transacted is a very unique object. And what I suspect, and the way SAP works and Oracle works and all these places work, they're not going to solve for a COA object in a batch and lot. They're going to give a tool set that allows developers to build those capabilities. But guess what? Ain't a lot of cannabis companies running SAP. So, you know, that's where I think we have this huge opportunity, because the high-end tools that give developer teams the ability to build those kinds of applications don't exist in this market.
Yeah, it's problem is any country has problem with SAP. Why? Because it's you need a consultant for SAP. Yeah. You need some service for SAP. You have to pay too much money for SAP. You have to pay too much license money for SAP.
Oh,
but
I know.
we don't take it from our country to SAP. We don't take it out. You know, that's the problem. What if we have to some connection, we have to some program, and if we have to some doing some project of this, and we have to connection with SAP system, and SAP system inside many country, many company, and many customers using this service, and we will connect it with everyone in the world, you know. But it's yes, something like is iPhone. We have to create some application for iPhone, and we have published on there, and many countries is using our application. And also for the SAP side, we are using something like this. I created some connection with healthcare side, and my customer, he said, please, we will connect it with SAP. And I say it's SAP is different platform and different ERP and for supply chain system. But I will try to connect it with this. I see SAP also working for blockchain and connection with the API service. And if we have some program for its SGS, GPI, it's SAP for anyone, and we have to connect it with the like module, you know. So now is we think about is global. If we are thinking only for country, it's for example, for FDA, for example, for London, for New York, for Turkey, for France, it's whatever we have. But we have to connection with the global system. And so if I take this product or your system, it's how can I use on the Turkey with the special site, you know,
EDI.
For France also.
EDI. So we have, our ERP application stack includes all the EDI, templates. And so we expect that, using the EDI standards, connectivity standards, we'll be passing that messaging to SAP or anyone else, because, that sort of underlying mature framework for transaction validation, through EDI connectivity, there's a lot of, open tools and open connectivity between all platforms for that standard globally.
Yeah, I'd like to ask Pravesh Day if he's got a comment. He's been waiting patiently.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, thanks, Pravesh. Thanks, Hakan.
Ramesh, if you could take yourself off mute.
Just Hakan, are you satisfied with the EDI solution? Is that what you were looking for an answer?
It's me.
Yeah, I just wanted to make sure that I answer your question sufficiently.
For its end of thing is, for example, in Turkey or in France, how can we connect it with our customer with this program, this system?
Yeah, we're going to use EDI. So the standard EDI endpoints. And again, I don't have Joel here to tell you exactly the data structures under those, but you know
yeah.
You know, we have EDI connectivity endpoints throughout the system, and SAP does and everybody else does. So we believe that the message structure and the platform for messaging will be EDI, again, because we have it, it's mature, it's there. But I need the developers to tell you what that actually, how that works.
Okay, I understand. Thank you so much for answer.
Okay, thank you. Sorry, Pravash.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Hi, Sin. Thank you so much. It was great presentation. So my question is, we are actually building a DAO, and we have already released NFT Ether. So we would like to work with the frontline staffs, in NHS and as well as cross-border. So is there any compliance issues we have to go through when we are actually building smart contract for, say, for example, Indian doctors who are already practicing in US and as well as in UK? So how we can build a global, smart contract for them, and what are the kind of do's and don'ts?
Thank you. Good question. Don't import CBD to India unless you want to go to jail.
No, we can actually export it.
Yeah, I know. You can export it. You can process it there, but you can't import it. So don't import it. So that's the first one.
Thank you.
And no, but that's a really good example, right? So, part of the validation logic in EDI is a location. Well, guess what? If this product is not legally transmissible into your location, then the EDI ain't going to work, right? We're going to be like, nope, can't do it. So, or it only goes one way. Is this an export transaction? Okay, you're allowed to do that. Import transaction, you're not allowed to do this. So that's some of the stuff that we can do through EDI fairly easily and build into the logic engine. But things to think about from your point, we start with jurisdictional issues. So jurisdiction to jurisdiction. The biggest thing that we are seeing is CBD is in some countries treated as cannabis. In some countries, it is treated as hemp. In some countries, it is treated as food. In some countries, it is treated as pharmaceutical. And so knowing the standards and what formats of products can be traded between countries is very important. So for example, Vantagehem right now can sell into Australia because of Australia standards and GMP standards. They're the same, and the classification of the product is the same as medical cannabis and so on the Australian side. So they can import it. Vantage can export it because it's hemp. And so now you've got Vantage exporting hemp, you've got Australia importing cannabis, funny enough, because in each country it has a different definition. So you need to harmonize those regulatory things. And so that's where you get it into the standards of quality, the quality control, and to your point, the certifications as well. So I think understanding what certifications are required jurisdictionally, well, that's where we come in, that's what we're doing. So you don't have to. That's probably the most important thing. And then the other thing I consistently try and tell everyone is don't try and integrate the financials. It's a nightmare. It's not necessary. There's entire teams and companies and businesses and divisions that worry about financials, valuations, cost of good models, inventory controls. Don't try and do all that. Well, that's my advice. I mean, I've been through 2 seed to sale ERPs that exploded. So I definitely would say that. What else would I say? Don't try and keep up the regulatory arms race. So like I mentioned that there are state level systems for compliance. Metric is one, BioTrack is another. In Canada, we have something called CTLS. Don't try and replicate all that. Just get the payload and be able to validate that payload against their requirements. I'm all about downloading the logic onto everyone else. Let them deal with the hard stuff of, people on the front lines and their workflows and their tasks. We don't want to be a tools company. We're not interested in building tools. We want to build automated data services that use AI to match and validate, so the people on either end of that transaction just push a button and say, all good, and then the money flows. So that's pretty much it.
Do you mind to share your email ID or maybe LinkedIn so that I can get in touch with you? I have a partner based out of Canada right now, and I'm pretty much on travel mode between UK and India, so we can get in touch with you for the compliance side.
Yeah, cool.
Awesome.
Sure, no problem.
That's awesome. Thank you so much. Thanks, Jared, for the opportunity.
Mark, I see your hand up there as well. Thank you very much for that, Prabhash. I appreciate that, and definitely reach out to me. I put my email in the chat here now, so thank you, Prabhash. And yes, Mark, I see your hand is up there. So I don't know if you're out and about, but if you had a question as well.
Absolutely. In fact, Sean, it's good to be back on. I think I was on a call with you and Ross not too long ago.
This Mark. Okay, good. Right on.
Yeah, we were supposed to connect again and hadn't had a chance to. I know we've all been busy. And it sounds like y'all have been really busy. So that's great. Y'all are moving pretty quick. So to your point and what you were talking about around the governance and the money, I mean, that is exactly what the upcoming GBA event is about, is the future of governance and money and the law, right? And it really sounds like what you're attempting to do in the hemp and cannabis space, which is amazing, is the fact that you are literally trying to create the blockchain and the supply chain to meet the law, right? Exactly. So it's a prime example of where blockchain really does make a huge difference in supply chain and laws and governance and money and all of that, right? So absolutely. I mean, you're right on the edge between the two right there.
We're ahead of the law. We're ahead of the law.
Ahead of. I mean, that's the space, right? It's how do you connect the finances with the supply chain and the product and make it all legal?
Yes. Yeah. And I believe we have a solve for that. We still need to roll it out. MVP April 1st. But and really excited to be working with this group, because the reality is, us chipping away at this would take us a long time. And this has been a great little accelerator for us.
And I'd like to, I'll go ahead and put a link to the chat in just a moment for the event, if anybody would like to attend.
Oh yeah, for sure. Great.
Are y'all create? Quick question. Have y'all thought through who y'all are building off of? Are y'all tokenizing, doing all that?
Yeah, so the way I'm thinking about it again, guys, like blockchain for me, high level, I'm a product guy, I'm a solutions guy, so I can't get it maybe into the details of how it all works, and that's what Kevin is for. Kevin couldn't make it today. But the way we've been thinking about it is, Kevin's an Ethereum developer. The way I've been thinking about it is consolidated data object, trust object, burned up, gets a blockchain referenceability, all systems validate against that, but they do the work down here because through EDI or whatever, because we can do it, we can build it within a legal federal integrated context up here, because we can access banking up here. Right. Down there, you've got maybe a slightly different challenge in terms of the monetization, which we have to work through here as a group. But we also think we have a solution for that. But that's where, again, Mark, you guys, you can bring a lot to the table, because our approach has been very much based on interoperability with standards that already exist. Whereas on the US side of the border, we may be looking at rolling out entirely different standards.
Right. Across another chain even, yes. At times.
Exactly.
Okay. Got it. I see exactly where y'all are at. That's great.
All right. So anybody who's interested in catching this or sharing this with any of their colleagues, if you go to the GBA, so if you go to YouTube and just search Government Blockchain Association, you'll find this, by Monday, you'll find this video up on that site. All right, anybody else have anything? Because otherwise we can roll it up.
Thank you everybody for a great afternoon.
Okay, thanks guys. Really appreciate it.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you very much.
Okay. Thanks guys.